Hello, everyone. Welcome back to week 7 of the offseason. I'm pretty sure I'm keeping track of that right. But let's get into it. We've got a few roster updates, and then honestly, it's mostly been gameplay, which has been pretty exciting to see a lot of these rosters. I say these rosters in quotes because most of it is FIFAe, but it's been cool to see these rosters in action for the past week. Roster updates. I know I've talked about this team before. Figured I'd announce it since it's official and it's a slow week. FUT Esports officially have signed Cheese, Sosa, and Frosty. They also pick up Adam Baguette as a coach. I think that's a solid coach pickup. And these guys are slated to be North America 5. The North American Cash Cup is this weekend, happening right now. And you don't want to jump to too many conclusions, but they did take down Shopify Rebellion 2-0 in the upper bracket. Granted, they lost to them in the lower bracket 3-1 after losing to the two-piece Wavy and Talk team in the upper bracket. But definitely a slightly surprising result. Granted, seems to sort itself out in the lower bracket based on what you would assume would happen, but still maybe one to keep an eye on. Down in South America, Chromax drops Brad and Bems. So drops and Brad, 2/3 of that MIBR roster that made Worlds through LCQ last year. Razebull is keeping the org, moving on without them. They pick up Bems, who was on Godfidence last year. He had a pretty solid, I think he was Godfidence was 3rd in points in South America. They had an up and down season where they had some potential, but never actually took series off of the top 2 teams. So this team, Chromax, I think they're a solid push for around that, SAM 4, SAM 5 seed, depending on what else happens. I'll definitely be talking about South America later as well. And then the last but not least, the big news that's actually news is Virtus.Pro. They were looking around for North America or European options. Looks like they found one. They're looking to sign the Impossible roster, as you guys might know them from the Coupe de France event. But that's Yujin, Mtzr, and Radosin. Ekon would also be expected to coach this trio. So depending on how you view these guys, I know I was probably saying they'd be around EU6 earlier in the offseason. Since then, we've seen 2 Danes, 1 Bruv actually, and they're sponsored by Liost, at least for this Coupe de France event. We've seen them take them down twice. I keep saying them. I'm going to confuse people. But still a very solid squad for Virtus to be picking up. All right, now let's get into the FIFAe teams. We have the European qualifiers, and they gave us 7 teams going to FIFAe, which is pretty exciting. And then we had the Africa qualifiers as well, which gave us 2 teams. So starting off with Europe, we had, 24 teams, I think is what it was, that were slated to be competing. And with that, only 7 got to advance. 16 would go into a playoffs, and then you win 2 series, you're definitely in. You win 1 series, you're into the top 8, and then there's elimination finals. So we'll get into the teams that won the first 2 series, made it to the top 4, and then played out their seedings. England was one of them. This is Joyo, Archie, and ApparentlyJack, coached by Eekso. This is a very, very solid team. Obviously, Joyo and Archie have ties from last year. Joyo and ApparentlyJack have ties from this year. They're looking really solid. They 4-0'd both Czechia and the Netherlands, I believe. France, of course, Zen, Vatira, and Exotiik, coached by Ferra. I know I mentioned Ferra retired from coaching, but he also moved into a more coaching the coaches kind of role. And it's also an opportunity to represent your nation, so I don't think Ferra was ever going to miss this. So yeah, he's still coaching the squad. Germany with Tox, Catalysm, and Rezears. They're going to be coached by Freakii. They actually made it through uppers as well, which might be a bit of a surprise. But I'm honestly blanking on who they beat, so maybe it wasn't. And then Belgium was Atow, Aztral, and Rysfox. Last year they ran it with Compact, they being Atow and Aztral. This year they're bringing in Rysfox, still qualify anyways. So those are the top 4 teams. Then you got into the kind of elimination part where basically there's 16 teams. That gets narrowed down to 8. You have your top 4 and then your bottom 4 that lose those series. They then play 2 matches. The winner of those matches get to advance. So getting into those 2 teams, Netherlands, they faced off against, I skipped a line, sorry. Italy, they faced off against Portugal. They ended up winning that. So that's Arju, Davoof, and Hyderr. Arju obviously played this year in North America as he's on St. Clair, I believe, for CRL. But he, of course, is going to try to represent his nation. I think he's one of the best 3 Italian players out there, and they end up qualifying. The Netherlands is where I wanted to go next. Joreuz, Oli, and Mike Boy. This was the trio that represented them last year at FIFAe, coached by Violent Panda, of course. But they faced off against Norway in that bracket, and they ended up winning. So you had Norway versus Portugal for the last match to see who would end up qualifying for FIFAe. It was quite a fun match, actually. It went to 7. Norway got a 3-0 lead in Game 7, and then Portugal tried to claw it back but couldn't get it done at the finish line. So Norway will be represented by Wozien Jup and Brucke, coached by Casper. They end up qualifying for the LAN in the last possible moment. So congrats to them. Obviously, we're missing some teams from last year. I think, at least in terms of Europe, it's mainly Spain that's the big omission here. Denmark is also a team that couldn't field a squad for FIFAe. Something with their federation wasn't letting them. And so disappointing to see neither of those countries being represented, because I know there's a lot of Spanish talent out there. And considering 2D1B has been doing very well this offseason, and that doesn't even include Nico, it's been a bummer to not see them. But nonetheless, still congrats to these countries. Obviously, Italy and Norway getting to show up to FIFAe for the first time is pretty cool as well. And then your African teams, you got, honestly, the expected favorites. You got the South Africa squad of To Die For, Snowy, and Guns. This trio, I think they were selected, and it was a bit controversial because I know Sweaty put something out on Twitter being like, I can't believe I wasn't selected, essentially. To Die For agreed with him. Honestly, that's probably expected given the fact that they're teaming for this year. But it is a little bit surprising. I think Sweaty's one of the better players in SSA, and no disrespect to Guns, but at least like the Limitless trio that comes to mind of Snowy, Sweaty, and To Die For, they were obviously going to split up with imports coming in and being able to employ a 2/3 rule and feeling like they need to get the level up. There's a top 4 players in SSA, in my opinion. They got 3 of the 4, but I don't think they got the best 3. And then Morocco, you've got Drali, Nas, and Skyrix. This basically signifies also Itachi, very much retired. Skyrix has been around the European Swiss stage for basically the entire season. And then Drali and Nas, of course. They didn't drop a single game in qualifiers from what they were saying. So those are the rest of your FIFAe teams. That's basically everybody decided. The only one that I haven't put up here is Saudi Arabia because they're hosting it. And honestly, I don't know if we've gotten confirmation about who's going to be representing them. So that might be a question mark. Maybe I just haven't looked into that enough. And if I haven't, I'll put something on the screen. But those are the FIFAe teams that are qualified. Then last but not least, flying under the radar this week is there's a small event going on in South America with the Ibrelesau. I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize. I am not Portuguese. If I was Portuguese, I would pronounce that better. But unfortunately, I don't know what I'm talking about completely. But this has been pretty exciting to follow along for this weekend. It's an 8 Brazilian teams double elimination bracket. And some of them are representing some football clubs that are down there, which is pretty cool to see as well. But some of the surprising results from this event. First off, we've gotten to see our first 2 iterations of Furia versus Team Secret. Furia still kind of owns the head-to-head in this. They won the first series 3-0, including a 6-1 in Game 2. And then they won the second series in the lower bracket 3-2. Now, this tournament hasn't finished, so you might be wondering, A, why has this tournament not finished? B, how did Furia end up in the lower bracket? Well, they actually got upset by Klaus, Suko, and Wisty, which was definitely a surprise because that's not a team you would be expecting to upset New Furia at any point. But that happened in the upper finals. And so Klaus, Suko, and Wisty make it to the finals through the upper bracket. That knocks Furia down to face Secret in the lower bracket. How Secret ended up facing them before the upper finals is kind of beyond me, but I didn't organize the tournament. But that means Furia go through the lower bracket, and they are set for a rematch against Klaus, Suko, and Wisty. I was kind of waiting for this to happen, and I was kind of clueless as to why it wasn't happening. But apparently it's going to happen on LAN. I was watching the stream, and then suddenly it switched over to FIFA or something like that, and here we are. So that series has not happened yet. It is happening at some point in the future. I am not sure. It's one to keep an eye on, considering it'll be a revenge match for Furia or another upset. So, but with all that being said, that's the update for this week. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Shout out to the channel members scrolling across the screen. And yeah, hoping to do a couple more, at least one more video this week. We'll see. But the offseason is starting to wrap up. A lot less moves coming through. And so I'm kind of just filling with some of the results. Cash Cups were this weekend as well. I know NA is going on right now. Definitely want to keep an eye on. I say going on right now. That's my time. That's not at the time this is being released. So, but that gives us a good idea of like some of the 3v3 rosters that we're seeing, including Mech, Eris, and Hoxer, who are 3 of the pieces in North America that I'm not sure where they're going. They're at least teaming for this event. So that's pretty exciting to see. But with that being said, hopefully y'all enjoyed. See you guys next time.